I used to clean the bathroom of an English pub at 3 in the morning, while I heard people laughing at me from the other side of the door. I once begged for work with an empty stomach, and was met with a look of disgust, as if my skin carried a disease. I've slept beneath a station staircase, hiding from the police, sweating cold in London's winter. But today, I walk into my office wearing a suit, open my email, and see British names on my company's hiring list. Funny how the game turns. The same accent that used to humiliate me now calls me boss. The same hand that once slammed the door in my face now hands me a resume. I'm black, Muslim, and an immigrant from Somalia. And if you think I should be grateful for being here, you're wrong. I fought for this. Nothing was handed to me. I was kicked, ignored, insulted. But I never bowed. They rejected me. But today I'm the one hiring them. If you think I'm exaggerating, listen to what I'm about to tell you. Because those who see my company thriving in London's most expensive neighborhoods have no idea where it all began. And maybe, by the end of this, you'll think twice before believing Europe only welcomes who it chooses. Because sometimes, the ones it rejects the most are the ones who come back and run the show. My name is Abshir Yusuf. I was born in Mogadishu, the capital of Somalia. I'm 38 now, but I arrived in London when I was just 19. I came with no English, no money, and no idea what was waiting for me. At the time, the only thing I knew how to do was run. Run from the sound of gunfire, from sirens, from the bodies covered with sheets that no one had the courage to bury anymore. I grew up watching my neighborhood turn into smoke and dust. I grew up watching friends disappear. And even then, my mother still told me to have hope. But hope doesn't fill your stomach. And in a place where even bread becomes a luxury, you quickly learn that if you want to live, you have to leave. I left Somalia with a torn backpack, a photo of my sister tucked inside a notebook, and the phone number of a distant cousin who supposedly lived in Birmingham. But I soon realized that the word help changes meaning when you become an immigrant. The truth is, no one wants you. Not your own people when you disappear, and not the new country when you arrive. I was rejected at job interviews, on trains, in supermarket lines. Rejected because of my name, my beard, the way I prayed. And don't tell me it was all in my head. I saw it in people's eyes, in the way they clutched their bags tighter, in the silence when I walked into an elevator. You don't need words to reject someone. In Europe, rejection is cold, polite, and disguised as procedure. They pushed me to the margins, as if my only role was to be a background figure in the tragedies they pretend not to see. But I never accepted that as my fate. I worked as a cleaner, newspaper delivery boy, helper in a halal market, loader in a fruit and vegetable warehouse. All the jobs nobody else wanted. They gave them to me. I took them. Because for me, it was that, or go back to hell. But inside me, there was anger. A quiet anger that grew every time someone looked down on me. Every time they pretended I didn't exist. And it was that anger that turned into fuel. Because I decided that one day I would stop knocking on doors. I would build my own. And if anyone wanted in, they'd have to ask. You can call me arrogant. I call it survival. Because when you're thrown to the bottom, you learn to climb with the kicks. That's how I started dreaming of having my own business, even while I was still cleaning other people's floors. Today, when I see my name at the top of my company's paperwork, I remember every no I ever got. And that doesn't break me. It feeds me. Before I arrived in England, my life in Somalia was a mix of stolen childhood and involuntary resistance. I was born in one of the poorest neighborhoods of Mogadishu, where dust clung to your skin, and the smell of burnt oil blended with the scent of bread baking in clay ovens. It was the kind of place where kids learn to run before they learn to walk, not for fun, but to survive. My mother worked miracles with just flour and water. I watched her turn almost nothing into something. I remember the nights when she pretended to have already eaten, just so there'd be enough left for me and my sister. She never complained, but I could see, in her eyes, the exhaustion of someone who had already stopped waiting for a better future. We didn't live. We escaped. One day at a time, always looking over our shoulders. At any moment, everything could collapse into chaos. The sound I hated most was that of distant explosions. It felt like the air itself trembled inside your chest. And even when it didn't hit us directly, that sound carried the feeling that life could end without warning. School? That was a luxury. I only attended until I was 12. After that, I worked for an uncle who sold dismantled car parts in a makeshift street market. There, I learned the value of improvisation. I learned that selling fast mattered more than understanding what you were selling. And I learned to keep quiet, because in the wrong place, saying too much could make you disappear. Islam was my only foundation. The daily prayers were the only times when life seemed to slow down. I held on to that, because when everything else fails, faith is the only shield left. But don't think my childhood was only misery. There were good moments too. I remember playing football in the street with a ball made of plastic bags tied with copper wire. I remember the smell of incense on holy days. I remember my sister telling me stories in a sweet voice while we shared the same thin mattress, listening to the wind rattle the tin roof. But all of that was slowly swallowed by reality. Violence escalated. Militias began recruiting by force, and my name showed up on a list. I found out from a neighbor who had escaped and came to warn my mother. That was the last straw. Either I fled, or I'd disappear. My mother gathered what little she had. She even sold her favorite cooking pot. She gave me an old notebook with some phone numbers and the address of someone she believed still lived in England. That was all. A notebook, a backpack, and the faith that I would make it. That day, I didn't say a proper goodbye. I couldn't look my sister in the eyes. I was afraid I'd cry. Afraid that if I saw her cry too, I wouldn't be able to go through with it. The journey started overland. I boarded an old pickup truck with 8 other men. All of us silent, all of us afraid. We spent days crossing deserts, sleeping on the hard ground, eating when we could. At every police checkpoint, a new bribe. At every stop, a new risk. We never knew if the driver would turn us in, if we'd be robbed, or worse. By the time I reached Libya, my feet were cracked, my skin cut by the sun, and my mind nearly blank. I was held in a warehouse for weeks with other migrants. We slept on the floor, surrounded by wire. We only went outside when some middleman came with a new promise of a safe passage. Nothing there was safe, but it was that or go back, and going back was never an option. I'd heard stories of people who tried to cross the sea and were never seen again. Even so, when they told me it was my turn, I went. I got into an overcrowded inflatable boat. I couldn't swim. My life jacket was old, torn, but something in me said, go. Close your eyes, and go. Those hours felt like days. The sun beat down hard, and the sea tossed us around like it wanted to spit us back. At one point, I thought we were going to flip, and in that split second, I made a promise. If I got out alive, I'd never again live a half-life. I'd never stay silent just to make others comfortable. When a European Coast Guard ship appeared on the horizon, it felt like a mirage. That was my rebirth. Of course, it didn't end there. Being rescued doesn't mean being accepted. After that came the refugee camp, screening, interrogation. But on that boat, something inside me changed. I wasn't just a survivor anymore. I was someone ready to win. And fate, as cruel as it was, still had room for someone who refused to die in silence. When I arrived in Italy after being rescued at sea, I was still just one among thousands. A number on a form, a tired face among so many others. I ended up in an overcrowded shelter where the smell of sweat and despair clung to your skin. We slept on thin mattresses side by side, like stacked pieces of a system that had no idea what to do with us. I stayed there for 3 months. 3 months eating the same cold rice, waiting for some kind of answer, any chance to move forward. Italy didn't want me, that was obvious. I saw it in the looks, on the streets, in the way I was treated. It was as if my presence was too visible, too uncomfortable, but I already knew what I wanted. Since leaving Somalia, my plan was to reach the United Kingdom. People said there was more work there, a large Muslim community, and that racism was more hidden, more polite. It was a lie, of course, but back then, I still believed it. The UK wasn't easy, and I knew that if I waited for help, I'd rot while waiting. That's when I took advantage of something many didn't even understand. At that time, it was still possible to legally enter the UK from another European Union country. It was before Brexit, and that made all the difference for me. With a temporary document issued by Italy and a legal loophole that allowed travel between EU countries, I bought a bus ticket with the little money I had saved cleaning hotel bathrooms in Naples. I crossed France and Belgium hiding my origin, pretending to understand words I'd never learned. Silent, sweating, on high alert. One wrong move, and I'd be deported. When I got to Calais, France, I saw up close what it meant to be treated like human waste. The migrant camp was an improvised slum. Tarp shelters, the stench of sewage, endless lines for a shallow plate of food. I saw people fighting over soap. I saw children crying. I saw despair become routine. But unlike many there, I had a plan. I knew I could take the ferry to Dover, legally, using my Italian document, and that's what I did. When I stepped onto that boat, heart racing and backpack on my back, I felt a mix of fear and triumph. Fear of being discovered, of being turned away, but triumph for having come so far, even with everything against me. The crossing took just over an hour, but to me, it felt like a lifetime. Every wave that hit the hull made my stomach turn, not from the motion, but from panic. I couldn't go back. I refused to go back. In Dover, I was questioned by an immigration officer. I showed my Italian document and stayed calm. My English was weak, but good enough to understand they let me through. Not out of kindness, but because they had no legal grounds to stop someone who, technically, came through the front door. And that's how I entered the United Kingdom. No tunnel, no hidden truck, no fence jumping. I used the only legal window that existed for someone like me, and I got through before it was slammed shut by the same Brexit that so many Britons proudly supported. But getting in is just the beginning. The real hell starts afterward. I arrived in London with nothing. No relatives, no support network, no bed. I slept at Victoria Station, using my backpack as a pillow. The cold cut through my clothes, and the hard floor punished my back. The next day, I went looking for help. I entered mosques, knocked on doors, asked where I could find shelter. A community center pointed me to a building where migrants shared rooms. It was dirty, cramped, but better than the street. There, I shared a single bed with another Somali man for months. We slept in shifts. I started looking for any job, and when I say any, I mean any. Cleaning, deliveries, unloading trucks, handing out flyers. I walked around with wet shoes all day because I couldn't afford to stop, even when it rained. London seemed like a beautiful city for those with money, but for those at the bottom, it was a battlefield. I watched the English walking around with their expensive coffees, wool coats, and brand new phones. Meanwhile, I shivered in the cold outside, hoping to be called in for an extra shift that might never come. Even when I finally got a steady job as a janitor in an office building in Stratford, the rejection was clear. Some people avoided even saying hello. I heard muffled laughter when I came out of the bathroom with a mop and bucket, and I didn't need to be a genius to know who they were laughing at. But I endured. I worked. I studied English on my own at night using videos and apps. I saved coins in a jar hidden under the bed. A year later, with the help of someone I met at the mosque, I got my first license to work as a self-employed delivery rider. I took a broken bicycle, bought a thermal backpack, and started delivering food. I rode up and down hills, through rain and traffic. Everything. But that's when I started to see the gap. Fast delivery was in growing demand. Restaurants wanted speed, but the big companies couldn't keep up. I began tracking peak hours, identifying high-demand neighborhoods, studying routes. With the delivery money, I bought my first used motorbike. Then a second. I rented it out to another delivery guy. And that's how Seed Express, my urban logistics company, began. Just a name on paper, but with real ambition. I started hiring couriers, renting small spaces to use as support points. While many still saw me as the Somali guy with a bike, I already saw a fleet in the making. And all of this was only possible because I got in before Brexit. Today, those trying to do the same face barriers that didn't exist back then. I crossed at just the right time, not by luck, but by staying alert, alive, and determined. The irony is that many of the British who voted to leave the EU wanted fewer immigrants like me. But today, they're the ones working for me. Drivers, operators, customer service reps. People who never imagined having a boss with a name like mine. And even without saying a word, I see the surprise in their eyes. And in mine, the pride. Because none of them know what I've been through, but I do. And every step I take in this country is a silent response to every rejection I once swallowed in silence. These days, I wake up at 5 in the morning, but not to clean shopping mall bathrooms or carry trash bags. I wake up to review the schedule of British drivers who work for me. I still start early, but now I start by giving the orders. And there's not a single day I don't remember how everything turned around. Seed Express grew faster than I ever imagined. The pandemic accelerated demand, delivery became essential, and I was in the right place with the right system. I knew the routes, understood the peak hours, treated small restaurants with care, while the big companies treated them like numbers. But growing in a country that doesn't want to see you succeed is like trying to run with a weight on your back. When I started hiring, I realized I was crossing an invisible line. As long as I was just another delivery guy, they ignored me. But the day I posted my first formal job opening, the looks changed. I started getting questions disguised as concern, but really they were discomfort, as if I didn't have the right to grow. One day, I personally delivered an order to a restaurant and left a business card with the company name, Seed Express. The British owner looked at the card, frowned when he saw my last name at the bottom. He didn't say a word, but his face said everything. That day, I realized my name bothered people more than I thought. So I made a decision. I changed the main brand to Seed Logistics, cleaner, more neutral, easier to accept for those who wrinkle their noses at anything that sounds foreign. Not out of shame, but to survive in the market. They forced me to camouflage my identity in order to grow. And even so, I grew. Still, the obstacles didn't stop. A bank refused to open a business account. A client disappeared after finding out the owner was a foreigner. A delivery guy quit after learning I was Muslim. But I never asked for acceptance. I only demand respect. And with that mindset, I kept the company standing. Today, I hire British employees who show up late, complain about the weather, ask for raises, forget their documents. And I deal with it like any other boss. But with one difference. I know that deep down, some of them still think they're better than me, even while asking me for a job. The same England that pushed me into cleaning jobs now depends on my business to keep deliveries moving. My vehicles drive through Stratford, Hackney, Camden. I've sat in meetings with restaurant owners who years ago would have ignored me if I were pouring water at their table. Now, they listen to my terms. The most ironic part? To many of them, I'm still invisible. Just an immigrant who got lucky. They have no idea what's behind my company. The sleepless nights, the years of humiliation, the fear I had to swallow in silence. They only see the tip of the iceberg. But that tip, I made sure to raise with force. When people say the UK isn't racist, I laugh. Because racism here doesn't shout. It whispers. It doesn't block you with violence. It ignores you with elegance. It pushes you aside without leaving a mark. But I learned to recognize that silence. And I learned to shout louder with actions. Today, I rent an office on the second floor of a commercial building in Whitechapel. A small space, 3 desks, 2 computers, a coffee maker, and a whiteboard where I plan the weekly routes. It may not seem like much, but to me, it's a throne. I'm proud to pay fair wages. I'm proud not to exploit immigrants the way I was once exploited. And above all, I'm proud that I never bowed. Some of the British workers who joined me started by saying they really needed the job, as if they were doing me a favor, as if it was something beneath them. But after 3 months clocking in, they're the ones asking to renew their contracts. They're the ones referring friends, praising the work environment. And I make it clear, here, no one is better than anyone. But no one will pretend I'm not the boss either. I've turned down clients who demanded only white couriers. I've cut ties with companies that treated my workers like they were invisible. Because now I get to choose. And nothing is more powerful than that. The freedom to say no to the very people who used to say no to me. The rejection I faced became a filter. It taught me who's worth trusting. It taught me that success isn't just about money. Success is walking down the street with your head held high. It's looking someone in the eye, someone who once looked down on you, and knowing that now, they need you. And if I really am a problem here, why are they the ones knocking on my door asking for work? Why are they the ones wearing my uniform? Why are they the ones following my orders? The answer is simple. They never expected me to survive. They thought I would disappear. They thought I'd accept being invisible. But I'm not invisible. I'm impossible to ignore. And if anyone still treats me like I don't belong here, I'll just smile. Because the same country that once tried to push me to the margins, now has no choice but to swallow me, as their boss. Today, when I look back, I see a path paved with rejection, pain, and resistance. Every step, every humiliation, every sleepless night became a rung on the ladder. I didn't step on anyone to rise, but I stood firm on every place they tried to sink me. England rejected me in every way possible. It rejected me with words, with looks, with a lack of opportunity. It pushed me into the dirty corners of the city, into the jobs no one wanted, into the shifts no one could bear. And even so, I stayed. Even so, I won. Some people think I should be grateful, but gratitude isn't what you feel for surviving contempt. Gratitude is what I feel for my mother, who taught me never to lower my head, and for my God, who gave me strength when the world tried to crush me. Not for a country that only saw me when I started making money. I never asked for favors. I came in through the rules that were in place. I worked twice as hard. I was invisible for far too long. And today, when someone shakes my hand at Seed Logistics headquarters, I feel that every callus on my palm was worth it. Seeing British people, the same ones who used to avoid me on the subway, now wearing a badge with my logo on their chest. That's more than a symbol of victory. It's an answer. I'm not a quota. I'm not charity. I'm not a problem. I am the result of their failure to erase me. And if you, who've listened to my story this far, still think I didn't deserve to be here, think again. Because today, the very country that tried to exclude me depends on me to keep moving. Leave your comment. Who really keeps this country running? Those who were born here, or those who wake up early to make it work?